We're asked if wxyz is not equal to 0 and this entire thing is less than 0 or negative, which of the following, meaning which of these guys, must be negative. So this is a positives and negatives question. It's asking you about the rules of positives and negatives, but it's a little bit more difficult, or it's made a little bit more difficult by throwing in all these exponents. Fortunately, there's a shortcut you can use to get rid of the exponents when you're dealing with these positives and negatives questions that include exponents. And the shortcut is the following. So if you see a variable that's being raised to an even power, you can just replace that with a plus sign, as long as this variable you know is not 0, which is what we're told here. And if you see a variable being raised to an odd power, you can just get rid of the power and write it as that variable by itself. So for example, when we have w squared times x cubed times y to the fifth times z to the sixth is less than 0 or is negative, I like to write it this way just to remind myself when dealing with a positive negative question. We can get rid of the w squared, replace it with a plus sign. X cubed just becomes x, y to the fifth just becomes y, and z to the sixth is just a plus sign. So now I have a positive number times x times y times another positive number gives me a negative result. Well, a positive times a positive is positive, and x times y is xy. So what we have here is that a positive times xy is negative. And here we just use the rules of positives and negatives. The only way that a positive times xy is negative is if xy itself, let me put this in a different color, if xy itself is negative. So we can get rid of this entire thing and just replace that with xy is negative or less than 0. Now that we have a much simpler version or simpler expression to deal with, let's take a look at the answer choices. So, or the Roman numerals. So we're asked whether w times z squared is less than 0. Well, z squared we know we can write as a plus sign, so we can replace this as is w times something positive less than 0 or negative. We don't know. All we know is that xy is less than 0 or xy is negative. We don't know anything about w, so we don't know whether w times something positive is negative. If it's negative, yes. If it's positive, no. So this Roman numeral 1 doesn't always have to be negative. Now Roman numeral 2 asks us, is xy negative? Well, that's what we simplified our expression to. So that's Roman numeral 2 is always negative. And finally, let's take a look at Roman numeral 3. We're asked, is x cubed times y times z to the fourth negative? Or must it always be negative? We can rewrite that. X cubed can just be x, y stays y. Now z to the fourth, we can replace that with a plus sign. So the question being asked is xy times something positive equal to a negative? We know that xy is negative, so the question becomes, is a negative times a positive negative? And it is. Therefore, Roman numeral 3 is also negative, so our answer is 2 and 3 are always negative.